Well, we got what has to be the most perfect corruption story out of the White House yet. A longtime Donald Trump aide, the guy who has run his teleprompter since 2016, a guy named Gabriel Perez, is believed to have made about $100,000 on the prediction market platform Kalshi by betting on what Trump will say in his scheduled speeches, including his State of the Union address in February. According to ABC News, which broke the story, quote, Kalshi alerted its regulator to the suspicious activity on its mentions market, where users can bet on whether specific words, phrases, or topics are uttered during a public speech. The White House basically confirmed the story in today's press briefing.
Obviously, I'm aware of the report. The president is too. I spoke with him about it. He believes it's deeply unfortunate and, frankly, a disgrace. And the individual that was cited in that report is complying with the CFTC, but has been put on paid administrative leave. So there will be a teleprompter operator tonight, of course, but it will not be the one, unfortunately, in that story.
Well, it's pretty rich. They find this one so deeply unfortunate, frankly, a disgrace, when it's completely emblematic of the most corrupt administration ever hold the White House, where we've seen everything from $100,000 for the teleprompter guy to billion-dollar crypto schemes to the millions going to the no-bid contract to fail at renovating the reflecting pool. The Trump regime is rife with corruption, big and small. David Fahrenthold, an investigative reporter at the New York Times, who reported this week on an FBI evidence team visiting the reflecting pool, and he joins me. Now, I was thinking of the prompter story today as somehow in the perfectly same category as a reflecting pool, which is like small and colorful enough to completely get your arms around. So I want to start just with the contract part of it before we get to the FBI, because you've been doing some reporting on that, like how this company got the contract, and they now apparently are going to get more money to fix the thing that it certainly appears they screwed up in the first place.
Yeah, the Trump administration gave out 2 no-bid contracts to work on the reflecting pool. One was to add a water purification system, but the bigger one, more than $14 million, was to this company, Atlantic Industrial Coatings. President Trump originally said they were his pool guys, but then later turned around and said he didn't know them at all. This company to put this sort of waterproofing coating down on the reflecting pool. Trump said it would last for 50 years. The Park Service thought it would last for 5 or 6 years. It really lasted a couple of weeks or less. By the middle of June, you could already see sections of it pulling up and floating in the pool. President Trump has said it was caused by vandals or something like that, but it appears that just there were problems in this application that they had been paid millions of dollars to do. Now we don't really know how long it's going to take to fix it, how much they're going to be paid, if anything, or even the extent of the damage.
The president has insisted this is the work of vandals, and the tale has grown more embroidered every time he brings it up. It was 100 yards, 150, 300. The most recent was that the vandals' slashes were 300 yards long, and floor of the pool was cut and then pulled upward with great force by these thugs. You report, the National Park Service reported described cuts in a different part of the pool, a strip of gray caulking around the pool's edge, which is very different. It did not mention the damage to the blue lining that covers its broad floor, though the Interior Department said later the blue section was disturbed. It does seem Occam's razor here is that it wasn't affixed properly and just came up, right? Isn't that a fair assessment of the evidence so far?
That's all the evidence we've seen points to that. You can see in internal Park Service documents, after a few days, they say, look, it's starting to pull up. It's easy to pull off. A little bit of force starts it going. There's nothing in those internal documents saying, oh, this was the work of evil vandals. Now, there have been some people charged with pulling up pieces of the pool, but that was days later after everybody had seen that it was already peeled.
Yes. So what the heck is the FBI doing out there gathering evidence, I guess, is my next question.
Probably wishing, thinking that they went to school for this, right? And saying how they can't imagine that they're there. So they're helping the park police investigate what President Trump has said, that this is a 350-foot gash in the pool and people pulled it up. So they were out there yesterday with basically 3D scanning equipment, like you might use in a crime scene to get a 3D model of a crime scene. But this crime scene is 2,000 feet long and 167 feet wide. So you can see them out there taking measurements, sort of surveying the scene like they're going to treat it like a crime scene. The odd thing about it is the pool is still really dirty. It's full of detritus from the fireworks show on July 4th. It's got all kinds of grime in it. So any damage to the pool is now buried under this layer of grime. I don't really know what they're getting in these surveys.
So, okay, so let's assess here. So the same company is now going to fix this. The bottom has turned gray, is no longer American flag blue. The FBI is out there with some sort of 3D rendering techniques to investigate a supposed master villain who has cut a 300-yard bottom in it. And it's still not fixed and now drained and sitting in the summer heat, dry and dirty.
Yeah, remember the whole reason that they said they needed to do these no-bid contracts and needed to rush this out, they couldn't look to see if anybody else could do the job better and more cheaply, was it had to be done by July 4th. Absolutely had to be ready for the Independence Day celebrations. And because it was done apparently so badly, instead of being ready, it had to be fenced off, the public kept away, and now it's dry. So it would have been better to just, power wash it once and let it, and then refill it than do what they've done. It would have cost a lot less.
Is there a way that are we ever going to get to the bottom of how this contract came about? Because at first I was like, oh, he if there's a single person in the world I think who has a pool guy, it's probably Trump. But then it turned out not to be his pool guy. So I don't actually understand how these people got it.
It is baffling. We're going to get to the bottom of it, Chris, but that's really important. President Trump came out and said on several occasions, he actually made a YouTube video from the Resolute desk in the White House where he said, I found these people. These are my pool guys. They fixed a pool at my golf club in Northern Virginia, and I found them and I talked to them. And they gave this the same account in several situations. None of that seems to be true. He doesn't know these people. They don't do pools. They're not his pool guy. They're not anyone's pool guy. So I don't know if he just made it up or someone told him this has happened. But he was relating this as something that he had personally done. And now he says that none of that was true. So I think that there was somebody named David Schutzenhofer, the general manager of Trump's golf club in Bedminster, seems to have played a role in choosing how all this happened. How he knows these people and how he got put in charge of that, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, we will await that with bated breath. And I have faith. If anyone can get to the bottom of this, it is you, David Fahrenthold. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
After months of radio silence from the Department of Justice amid their mishandling of the release of the Epstein files, survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse are finally getting their opportunity to meet with Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, and it's happening later this hour. The meeting comes after this powerful testimony from Epstein survivor and friend of this program, Danny Bensky. It comes on the second day of Todd Blanche's confirmation hearings. Watch.
We may look like grown adults when you see us now, but we were children, young girls at the time of our abuse. These are the photos of when our innocence, dreams, and lives were stolen. Please take these faces in as you think of us as your own family, daughters, nieces, sisters. Now look at our faces and remember the women and families of who the DOJ re-victimized. Todd Blanche has been at the helm of the release of nude images of survivors, the outing of Jane Doe's, and the exposure of more than 100 victims identifying information and documents describing horrific acts of abuse, including my own. Instead of treating this release as its own violation and holding the man who led it accountable, you have a decision on whether you place him in the highest law enforcement position in this country.
Now, this meeting that Danny and other survivors are having with Todd Blanche is only coming because Republican Thom Tillis made it a condition for arriving at yes to confirm Todd Blanche. It's not like Todd Blanche woke up and said, maybe I should listen to the survivors of abuse. No, this is to get a vote, but it is happening. But important to note that Todd Blanche easily could have met with survivors months ago or years ago at this point, 2 years ago when he took the job, when they requested to meet with him. Another flashpoint at Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing today was testimony about the damage that Todd Blanche has already done to the Department of Justice because of the purge of thousands of career employees that he is responsible for and that he's even publicly bragged about. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee sought to highlight how these firings should be disqualifying for anyone seeking to leave the department. They called on former DOJ pardon attorney Liz Oyer, someone we turn to understand what's happening inside the department. Democrats today wanted her to testify about why she says she was fired by Todd Blanche and explain the lengths he and his office went to keep her quiet about it. Watch.
2 days after Mr. Blanche was confirmed as Deputy Attorney General, he fired me from my position as the department's career pardon attorney. I declined to rubber stamp a political favor for a friend of the president, and it cost me my job. Mr. Blanche's office had asked me to recommend restoring the gun ownership rights of a convicted domestic abuser. I raised concerns about public safety, but Mr. Blanche's staff pressured me to go along anyway. I did not. But because this particular domestic abuser had a personal relationship with the president, Mr. Blanche's staff asked me to set aside my concerns. When I wouldn't, Mr. Blanche fired me within hours. He then took extraordinary measures to silence me. He sent U.S. Marshals to my home in an effort to prevent me from speaking with members of Congress.
Seems like a pretty clear and obvious sequence of events. Decline to do a favor for Donald Trump's friend, lose your job at the hand of Todd Blanche. But in Todd Blanche's confirmation hearing yesterday, he tried to assert that Liz Oyer's firing had nothing to do with her declining his request to restore gun rights to Donald Trump's friend, the actor Mel Gibson, and said that he, in fact, tried to give her heads up that U.S. Marshals were heading to her house. Here's Liz Oyer rebuking those claims from Todd Blanche about her firing and warning the Senate and the public that putting Todd Blanche in charge of the Department of Justice is a threat to the country.
I was shocked to hear Mr. Blanche's testimony about this yesterday. What he said about my firing is provably false. His claim that it had nothing to do with the concerns I raised is contradicted by documents and evidence. His claim that he tried to call me before sending marshals to my home is flat out false. His claim that it is normal for DOJ to use armed law enforcement officers to deliver mail to the homes of its former employees is preposterous. The casual lies that Mr. Blanche tells, even while sitting in this chair testifying to this committee, are emblematic of a much larger problem. To the American public, it looks like Mr. Blanche is running DOJ as Donald Trump's personal law firm. Americans across the political spectrum rely on DOJ to keep us safe and free. Mr. Blanche has shown that he is willing to put all of that at risk to serve a political agenda. I beg the members of this committee to think about what this is costing our country. Please do not degrade our justice system further by promoting Mr. Blanche.
The destruction Todd Blanche has already wrought at the Department of Justice, which he's seeking to lead, is where we start today. Former Department of Justice pardon attorney Liz Oyer joins us. She is now the host of the podcast, Is This Really Legal? And with me for the hour, senior political analyst, host of the Runaway Country podcast, author of the Substack, How the Hell with Alex Wagner. Alex Wagner joins us. Liz, your testimony was extraordinary and courageous. Just take me through the experience.
I was really nervous to go up there and testify, Nicole, because I don't know what the Justice Department is capable of under Todd Blanche's leadership. They've put me through the ringer once in connection with my firing. When I spoke out about my firing, they sent armed law enforcement officers to my home. Mr. Blanche has demonstrated that he has a very casual relationship with the truth. He lies when convenient to get what he wants. And so I have this fear of what shoe might drop next, what he might try to do to me next. It seems like he coordinated with some of the Republican members of the panel to try to attack my credibility in the hearing. And that was really the focus of all the questions I got today, which was surprising. I didn't get any questions from the Republican members of the committee about Mr. Blanche. I got a lot of questions about myself in an effort, I think, to suggest that I'm not a credible witness because they really don't have any response on the facts. They don't have any way to dispute any of the things that I testified about. So, Mr. Blanche, I think, just proved himself in the hearing to be somebody that he really desperately wants this job, and he will say what is necessary to get it. And I felt like it was my duty to go up there on the Hill today and share my own experience and tell the truth. Felt like that was my duty to my fellow citizens, to the many people in this country who care about the Justice Department and who care about our future. And, it wasn't a pleasant experience. It was very stressful. I'm very tired, but I'm glad I did it. I felt like it was the right thing to do.
Are you more afraid now than before you testified against Todd Blanche?
Yes. He's, at this point, one of the most powerful people in the country, and he stands to get potentially even more powerful if he's confirmed. And I'm well aware that I've sort of pitted myself against as an opponent of this incredibly powerful man who has proven that he is vindictive and lies. And, I just don't know what he's capable of, and it is genuinely very scary. But I'm more scared of what his leadership will do to our justice system. We all rely on a justice system that is fair and impartial to protect our civil rights, to keep us safe. And Mr. Blanche is a real threat to that. So the risk of testifying against him, in my mind, it was a no-brainer. It was worth taking.
Liz, do you ever wonder how you ended up fighting this fight? Not alone, but without some of the former leaders of the Department of Justice, people like Merrick Garland or Lisa Monaco, or leaders of the FBI, Christopher Wray, under whom all of you served and worked, and who, even if they couldn't keep Todd Blanche from harassing you or investigating you, they could testify to the character of the workforce of the men and women of the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I think it's sort of a mixed bag, because there is a segment of our country that associates Merrick Garland and other leaders of the Justice Department under Biden with Biden's leadership. And there are people who are unhappy with Biden's leadership. And my goal in speaking out, I was not a political appointee. I wasn't appointed by President Biden. I didn't work for him, didn't work for any president. I worked for the American people, and I was non-political. And my goal in speaking out, and I think the goal that other non-political Justice Department employees have, is to really try to amplify that the Justice Department is not a political place. Almost all of its work is non-political. It benefits everyone, regardless of your partisan political affiliation. And I don't know that it would be helpful to have people like Merrick Garland sort of leading the conversation on that. I don't have, the same name recognition and platform as someone like that, but I feel like my voice has a certain credibility because I'm nonpartisan. I do hope that more nonpartisan career employees of the Justice Department will join this conversation to really try to demonstrate to the American people that DOJ is not meant to be political. Its work matters to all of us, regardless of partisan politics. And we cannot have someone like Todd Blanche in charge of the powers of the Justice Department.
Apparently, Pete Hegseth is attempting another rebrand of the Pentagon. Allow me to introduce you to the High T Department of War, where the T stands for testosterone.
Our most decisive tactical advantage will always be the individual warfighter. We have a sacred duty to maintain that advantage, which is why we must constantly look for new ways to optimize your performance, your resilience, and your long-term health. And to meet that commitment today, I'm authorizing a new screening program for testosterone deficiency for our service members, ensuring you have the right testosterone levels to operate at your absolute best.
This is not a parody. This new mandatory policy will test both male and female troops over 30 for low testosterone. Anyone with low hormone levels will have the option to receive testosterone replacement therapy. Joining us now, Rachel Van Landingham, a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force and a former JAG. Eddie Glaude is still with us. Rachel. Okay. What message does this send our troops?
Well, it sends our troops, who, by the way, the United States military engaged in 6 hours of airstrikes last night over Iran, that, that the Secretary of Defense is more worried about, limiting medical autonomy of our troops than he is regarding, the major war that's being waged right now. What's really striking to me, Alicia, is the broad brushstroke of this new policy and the fact that it applies to women as well as men. There is no FDA-approved low testosterone treatment for women. And if he's really concerned about the health of our force, and preventive medicine is a good thing, then he should also be mandating estrogen screening because for women over a certain age, because there's tons of research out there that estrogen is needed and it declines drastically in women over a certain age. So this focus really on male virility, male testosterone, and the fact that it was rolled out by the sitting Secretary of actually Defense, aka War, during a time of war is troubling.
I want to pick up, Rachel, on what you just said there, because the Defense Department declined to say whether there would be estrogen screenings for female service members and if there would be repercussions for service members who declined recommended testosterone treatment. NBC News points out that since 2015, these therapies, quote, carried warning labels and have only been available to men who have both low testosterone and an associated medical condition. Any concerns, Rachel, that troops could potentially get medical interventions they don't actually need?
Well, I do trust the medical providers within the military to follow approved FDA guidance. And let's be honest here, the fact that Congress did mandate the Pentagon just last year in the National Defense Authorization Act to do a deep dive into a screening for low testosterone and possible treatment protocols. So this has long been a concern, particularly amongst our special operations personnel, that low testosterone was something that was afflicting particularly them in greater numbers. But there was a stigma in seeking screening for it, a stigma because they were afraid of an effect on deployability. So they were often going off base, off label to try to treat this. So I think, in a nuanced way, this is a good approach to saying, hey, look, everyone's going to get screened once a year during part of your already annual physical health assessment. This is just a screening tool to ensure that, we head off things at the pass for men over a certain age. That's fine. But I'd like to see that it's limited to men, that there are privacy protocols put into place and transparency regarding what's the effect of this if the member declines the treatment. And parallel to that, what about women? Women shouldn't be tested for testosterone. Yes, women have testosterone, but at rates 10 to 20 times less than men. And it should be part of a much broader preventive health approach, such as estrogen, hormone replacement therapy, screening, and then, guidance one-on-one with their providers.
That context is so fascinating, Eddie, especially because Hegseth doesn't sound like the Secretary of Defense in that video. He sounds like an influencer who's trying to sell you supplements. And it's all right. It's all because it all sounds vibes based.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Rachel just laid out makes me less harsh, less judgmental about what the policy is about. But I think there are three things that really animate my response to this. One, every time Hegseth talks about manly man, I just want to play Men in Tights. That's the first thing I want to do. The second thing I want to talk about is that we need to begin to think about the way the intellectual kind of lines, the kind of tributaries that inform and shape this stuff. This sounds a lot like a kind of respectable version of Bronze Age pervert stuff around manly man, around a certain kind of notion of masculinity that we need to begin to interrogate. And then there are, of course, Hegseth's Christian commitments. This is also tied to a kind of muscular Christianity that was really critical to the 19th century, that led to an expansion of YMCAs and the like, about spiritual athletics and the like. And we see this discourse animating much of what Hegseth has done, and particularly the folks he's committed to. Religious community they're committed to. So we need to see these tributaries and connect the dots, it seems to me.
It's interesting to me, your slip of tongue there, because you said Donald Trump instead of Hegseth, but we all know where this actually comes from, which is this idea, Rachel Van Landingham, that somehow the American military is not mighty enough, that there had to be a culture shift. And I think that is the challenge. It is hard not to see this policy in the broader culture shift that Hegseth has brought to the fore.
Absolutely, Alicia. And it's not that it's just not mighty enough. It's not white male enough for Secretary Hegseth. Secretary Hegseth has fired women, senior military leaders, has blocked for no cause senior military women being promoted. He's blocked their promotions. He has said in his books and written that he does not believe women belong in combat. He has mandated the highest male standards for combat positions. This seems part and parcel of his war on women, as well as his war on minorities. You can fit that all together.
Professor Rachel Van Landingham, Eddie Glaude. I am so grateful to both of you. Thank you so much for being with us.
I want to turn this a little serious. This guy felt comfortable also judging your faith. This guy and others felt comfortable saying that you're going to hell. Now, I find this absolutely fascinating that somebody could be so ignorant of the Gospels of Jesus Christ that they would make such a proclamation in a political campaign, not even knowing that Jesus said, "Judge not that ye be not judged. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy." The same, by the measure that you use for other people, I will use that measure against you. I mean, the fastest way to hell, if you believe what Jesus Christ says, is to be focused on the speck in your neighbor's eye instead of the plank in your own. And yet again, they continue to attack your faith and your relationship with Jesus Christ, which again, I not only find offensive, but I also find it self-defeating, because people that actually read the Bible, that read the red letters, understand that is the last thing a Christian is supposed to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas, in Laredo. And when I was real little, he told me that as Christians, we're supposed to follow the 2 commandments that Jesus gave us, to love God and to love neighbor. That's it. Christianity is a simple religion, he would always tell me. Not an easy religion, because it's not always easy to love our neighbors, but it is a simple religion. And if we can focus on those 2 commandments, if we can love our neighbors, not just our neighbors who look like us, not just our neighbors who pray like us, not just our neighbors who vote like us, if we can love all of our neighbors, including our enemies, that's when we are truly following that barefoot rabbi from 2,000 years ago. It's that commandment to love thy neighbor is what it got me into public service. It's why I became a public school teacher on the west side of San Antonio. It's why I ran for the state house. It's why I've passed those 60 bipartisan bills to lower people's costs. I'm trying to love my neighbor through public policy. I'm trying to make my neighbor's life a little easier, a little better, a little less stressful.
Yeah.
And it feels like that kind of love has been missing from our politics, from our public service for a long time now. And it really does feel like in Texas, that message from 2,000 years ago is still resonating with people today, particularly today, given the divisive, corrosive politics we've all been suffering under for 10 years now.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into theology here, but there is something really important that needs to be said based on what you just mentioned, what your grandfather, the preacher, told you. Jesus is very clear. All the laws, they all collapse into 2 things: love God, love your neighbor. And this is so important to explain. I will say to my Republican friends who don't understand this, who may not have read the Bible, but also people that want to understand more of like what's going on the hard right, how it's the antithesis of what Jesus preached. So Jesus said to the disciples, love God and love your neighbor. The disciples said, oh, who's my neighbor?
That's right.
After Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor. So what does Jesus say? He goes, let me tell you a story. And he tells the story of the Good Samaritan and tells how a man's beaten up, he's left on the side of the road, and all of his friends, all of his neighbors, all of his own people passed him by, left him in the ditch to die. It was a despised Samaritan. It was a foreigner. Right. Jesus specifically picked a foreigner who was the most despised to save this man in the ditch. And he said, that is your neighbor. So when I see people being gunned down in the streets, when I see people despising the others, whether they are black or they are brown, because they don't fit into their vision of what a white America is like, can you explain how that is the antithesis of everything Jesus taught his disciples, especially when he was telling them how to get to heaven?
Yeah, you're taking us to church, Joe. This parable of the Good Samaritan, I think, has so much to offer us in this moment in our country, this moment in the world, because you're absolutely right. For Jesus's listeners 2,000 years ago, that story of the Good Samaritan would have been shocking. You know, these days we think of a Good Samaritan as someone who just helps people on the side of the road. And that's important. You should help people on the side of the road. But we're forgetting how radical that message was, that he picked a Samaritan, not just an enemy, but a religious enemy. And so he lifted up the heretic. He said the heretic is where salvation comes from. That is such a shocking message. It's still shocking today. I've said it's as if Jesus stood in the middle of DKR Memorial Stadium at the University of Texas and told a story called The Good Aggie. Like, it would be shocking to the folks who were listening. And no, my dad's an Aggie, so I can make that joke. But, you know, I think we have to remember that the other, the outcast, the enemy, has something to teach us. And I would say that's true for the Democratic Party, too. Jesus would be telling us that the person who's going to help us is our MAGA uncle. And that would be shocking for Democrats to hear. So we all need to check ourselves, because these media systems, particularly social media, these algorithms, they divide us for the profit of a few people at the very top. They're pitting neighbor against neighbor, telling us that our enemies are the problem. And Jesus is trying to break all of that from 2,000 years ago. His message is as relevant today as it's ever been. And I think if we can learn to love thy neighbor, if we can learn to love our enemies, that is the key to saving this American experiment in self-governance, not just here, but this experiment in democracy all over the world.
So how do you take this message to the voters in Texas, but also to your competitor, Ken Paxton? We understand you have an announcement.
Well, you know, Ken Paxton's billionaire handlers don't let him answer questions in public. He hasn't appeared on a debate stage in more than a decade. He refuses to answer basic questions like, why did you give an Epstein-style sweetheart deal to an admitted child predator, Adam Hoffman? How did you become a multimillionaire on a government salary? Did Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks, your top two billionaire mega donors, buy an acquittal in your impeachment trial? He won't answer, I think, those very relevant questions. He doesn't answer to the public because he's not a public servant. He is a puppet politician. And I want him to prove me wrong. As we just talked about, we have to be focused on forgiveness and redemption and second chances. And so that's why I am challenging Ken Paxton to 3 televised debates. I'll be on that debate stage because I answer to the people of Texas. Ken Paxton answers to his billionaire mega donors. We'll see if they let him show up.
Democrats replacing their Senate nominee in Maine after Graham Plattner dropped out over serious sexual assault allegations, which he denies. Now, Democrats need just 4 seats to take back the Senate. Maine is a top prospect because it's a Democratic state. Voters there backed Harris by 7 points just last election. It went blue, if you check, in the last 9 presidential races in a row. And yet this blue state has a Republican senator in Susan Collins. And she's won 5 elections there, largely by making the case that, this is what she claims, she tells voters she's a centrist, that she believes in compromise and bipartisanship, that she's a proponent of women's health, often claiming, as I'll show you, that she will be a defender of abortion rights in the Senate. And, as you see, she says that to this year, she is an independent voice. But these claims have been falling apart over time. So tonight, after the understandable attention on the Democratic ticket in that state, right now we turn to a special report on why Maine is such a focus in the first place. It's because of its vulnerable, embattled, and sometimes misleading incumbent senator. And the choice facing Maine voters is, as I just showed you with just a handful of states that matter, a place where their choice, if you're watching in Maine, your choice, could determine the control of the entire United States Senate in just a few short months. So for Maine voters, one of the key hurdles for electing any Republican senator has been Roe v. Wade, abortion rights, women's rights. Most voters there are pro-choice. But As we all know, you're watching the news, so you know Republicans have long demanded as a litmus test, requirement, no negotiation, they will only put pro-life judges on the Supreme Court. And so Collins has spent years trying to tamp down what is a volcanic issue for her at home by vowing to oppose judges who are against Roe. She campaigned as a pro-choice candidate since her 1996 election. She said she supported Roe, and she accepted donations from pro-abortion rights groups. Open Secrets has documented that. She also told voters that she was vowing to oppose any Supreme Court nominee who would overturn Roe v. Wade. That goes years back, and she said it over and over. That was the main thing her constituents saw as the problem with having a Republican senator.
I would not support a nominee who demonstrated hostility to Roe v. Wade, because that would mean to me that their judicial philosophy did not include a respect for established decisions.
She wouldn't do that. Wasn't going to do that. Said that over and over. Now, you might recall Trump's nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, was clearly a conservative activist with a conservative judicial record. He was likely to overturn Roe. Experts and activists loudly noted that in real time before his confirmation vote. And, just to be crystal clear, Donald Trump himself said he would only pick among a list of pro-life judges suggested by pro-life or anti-abortion legal groups. So this whole thing was organized as, hey, we're only looking at that kind of judge. And Kavanaugh, as you may recall, faced skepticism for many reasons. He lost the vote of another Republican senator, Lisa Murkowski. They needed Collins' vote to get to 50. And she'd made a big show of sharing her concerns, raising Roe and these issues in her meeting with him, which drove headlines about what she would do. In the end, after everything I just showed you, everything she told Maine voters for years, she then came out casting the 50th vote for Justice Kavanaugh, breaking the thrust of her promise, which she memorably tried to explain, casting this key anti-abortion vote, this pro-life vote, this anti-Roe vote. She tried to explain it in a long and winding floor speech the day of that vote.
Maine pledged to nominate only judges who would overturn Roe. There has also been considerable focus on the future of abortion rights based on the concern that Judge Kavanaugh would seek to overturn Roe v. Wade. Protecting this right is important to me. The judge asserted to me a long-established precedent. It's not something to be trimmed, narrowed, discarded, or overlooked. Mr. President, I will vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh.
The ayes are 50. The nays are 48.
There you have it. One of the most significant votes of Collins' career. A vote that was crucial to putting Kavanaugh on the court. He was selected and announced from that list of pro-life judges. And at the first judicial opportunity they got within about 4 years, Kavanaugh was crucial to that new MAGA majority, thanks to Susan Collins, gutting Roe v. Wade.
Breaking news from the Supreme Court at this hour. The justices handing down the highly anticipated ruling on abortion.
Roe was a 50-year-old precedent that had been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court itself multiple times. That did not matter to them at all.
People here talking about that feeling of moving backwards.
The Roe v. Wade reversal sending thousands of Americans into the streets.
This decision is really seen as devastating to so many women across this country.
Now, today I can tell you Collins has a roughly 58 disapproval rating. That's very negative, very high. And from the nomination hearings to these more recent times, people are getting fed up.
She is not hearing Maine women.
I'm a Democrat, but I have always voted for Susan Collins until this year. She's just capitulated.
She's not listening to what the people of Maine want anymore.
Collins has been there way longer than she should have been, and it's time for a change.
That's a big dynamic when you listen to some of the voters. Calls for change that, of course, predate the recent Maine news, which is the Democrats' search for the right candidate to run against her. But Collins' concerned dance about judicial nominees extends to a lot of other issues. It's kind of like her main political move at this point. Some view it as a shtick that has become such a kind of recurring, recycled, and unreliable nod to a type of fake moderation that the script has become kind of a running joke, at least in the informed or nerdy political circles where people track each individual senator, have noticed her doing this, and it's a theme in some campaign ads.
For 30 years in Washington, she's been
very concerned. I have a number of concerns. I'm also concerned.
Collins is always concerned, but never courageous. Caving to Trump on health care.
Concerned.
On affordability.
Concerned.
On ICE.
Concerned. I am very concerned.
She is concerned, and she has found this has worked so far. Now, Collins is also vulnerable, like some other incumbents, because of the larger revolt against the out-of-touch, aging incumbent politician population, and that's across both parties. Calls for generational change are rampant as long-serving incumbents cling to power. We've seen that in primaries, Democratic and Republican. And in the case of Collins, she's also outlived her own vows back when she was a younger, newer leader. Way back in the day, decades ago, she was tapping into the actual sentiment that we see today, issuing what would become, I'll just warn you, another broken vow to Maine voters.
I have pledged that if I'm elected, I will only serve 2 terms, regardless of whether term limits law, a constitutional amendment passes or not. 12 years is long enough to be in public service, make a contribution, and then come home and let someone else take your place.
That's what she said, and she broke that vow. Had she honored it, she'd actually had to have stepped away from the Senate back in 2009. Now she's breaking that vow again this election cycle, seeking what would be her 6th term. If she wins, she would complete that term at age 80. Susan Collins is a charter member of the very political class she ran to oppose, breaking her own vows, clinging to office for another term, part of this aging gerontocracy with often sclerotic ideas that insists on trying to rule over what appears to measurably be a majority desperate for new leadership. Collins is a long ways from the upstart candidate who was advocating sweeping changes and said that was needed over incremental steps.
It is very important that we recognize the many successes and the exciting projects and the innovations that are going on every day throughout the state. We can't do with incremental changes. We need sweeping changes. Sweeping
changes, term limits, pro-choice leadership. It's almost like every big thing she emphasized she has broken. That was from Collins running for governor in a race she actually lost to Angus King in 1994. Update to our Senate today. King is 82, serving as the junior senator with fewer years in the body than Collins from their same state. She's now running to hit 36 years total. If you're counting, that's 3 times longer than the cap she claimed to set for herself. And yet, as Collins told Maine voters,
12 years is long enough to be in public service, make a contribution, and then come home and let someone else take your place.
12 years is long enough, so she said. Many Maine voters now do seem to agree with what has become a discredited claim from their representative, who has become the problem she campaigned against, at least on the issue of incumbency. Collins has added that vow to several others that I showed you she broke in pursuit of this lifetime of power, perhaps regardless of the cost to her state or her own credibility. Now, to channel the incumbent with that trail of broken promises, a Maine voter might look at all this that we just saw, the facts, the record, her own claims and actions, and say, you know, this is concerning. You might even say it's very concerning. Or the voters might do something different than their aging incumbent, and they might actually do something about it.